Hello and welcome back to Season 4 of Puck Drop. If this is your first time watching the show, we talk all about the New Jersey Devils and the NHL as a whole every once in a while. And today, I'm joined by Jacob Gorin. Usually Ryan Lauer would be in this seat, but today...
I'm Jordan Cooper.
What did I say?
You said Jacob Gorin.
This is Jordan Cooper. I'm sorry.
It's a new season.
New season.
It happens.
Need to get back. Need to get back into the groove.
Puck Drop is back.
Puck Drop is back. Usually Ryan Lauer would be in the seat. Unfortunately, he cannot join us today. He's touring colleges. Best of luck to him in the college process. Alex Selvin is with us. Fortunately, he's a Rangers fan, but we can bypass that. He does like the Devils.
It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here. Listen, grown up in Jersey my entire life, and I'm a hockey player. Of course, I'm going to have some appreciation for the New Jersey Devils.
Yes. If you haven't watched before, we did make an episode during the summer talking about the Devils off-season, so we will not be covering that today. That's on our YouTube channel. You can go check that out if you please. We're going to start things off by talking a little about the Devils preseason, in which they've already played 5 games and they're 4-1.
Yeah, their preseason is going really well. You did see that the main thing, although they've won 4 games and they've played really well during the preseason, the main takeaway for me is the Nico Hischier injury. I believe he's still injured, correct?
Yeah.
But he'll be back for the regular season. What I've seen so far is that the players we've expected to break camp are probably going to break camp. Alex Holtz is probably going to break camp. Nico Hischier is going to be back. Those are the 2 main takeaways for me this preseason.
There have been some players that have really impressed me. Yes, Nico Hischier, I'll talk about that first. He did experience a hamstring strain, and like all hockey injuries, when it first came out, the team said it was cramps. They ran some more tests. Hamstring strain,
injuries.
Lower
body, upper body. They never tell.
Never tell. But Nico Hischier hamstring strain, will be reevaluated in just a few days from now, I believe. Hopefully, he will be ready for the first game of the season in Philadelphia on October 13th. But if not, the Devils still have a really solid forward core.
Absolutely. I mean, you talked about Alexander Holtz coming in off of camp, and that's a nice young talent. Someone to look forward to for the future for the Devils, and especially you're seeing him come in only a year or 2 right after being drafted and develop and making and producing for the Devils during the preseason.
And Alex Holtz, he not only has he looked really good in preseason, one of the reasons why that it hasn't been talked about nearly enough, I feel like, is that he trained with Jesper Bratt, and the person Jesper Bratt has been training with in Sweden for the past few years. He trained with them this summer. And you can really tell he's built in some of that more explosive speed, some of that more that shiftiness in the corners on the edges. His skating's clearly gotten better.
Some of the things that he's lacked, he's really been a sharpshooter before this.
Yeah, and there's a quote, and his passing's gotten a lot better too. There's a quote from Fabian Zetterlund, another Devils prospect that's looking like he's going to make the team at a camp, that Alexander Holtz, everyone knows he's a great shooter, but I actually think he's a better passer. That's a quote from Fabian Zetterlund. I don't know about that, but he has definitely improved his playmaking quite some bit.
Well, Jacob, as our authority on prospects, preseason is a great time to examine what prospects are going to break out of camp and be surprising for the Devils this year. Who do you think that's going to be based on what you've seen?
I really feel like Fabian Zetterlund, 2nd year in a row. I said last year Fabian Zetterlund was my guy. He's my guy again. He has just looked so good in camp. He is so strong on the puck for a guy who's like 5'10". I've always loved Fabian Zetterlund, and he is my pick again to be the Devils' unexpected breakout rookie this year. But let's move away from rookies because Alex, of course, is not as familiar with the New Jersey Devils prospect pool as us. Let's move towards more recognizable names, some of the new guys that have looked really good. I'm going to start out with John Marino, who has just been lights out in preseason so far.
I mean, absolutely, John Marino, guy coming from the Pittsburgh Penguins, great development there. He's a couple years into the league. Solid body, solid appearance on the defensive end. Little lackluster when it comes to offensive production. I know he moves the puck well and holds the blue line, but he's going to be a guy that's going to add to that defensive depth that the Devils so desperately have needed throughout the last couple of seasons. And he's young talent. As always, you want and love that young talent for a young team like the New Jersey Devils, who are going after all this young talent and developing a strong young core for the future ahead.
And John Marino, I had been to one of the Devils preseason games a week ago from today, last Tuesday, and I saw John Marino there. And of course, they traded Ty Smith for him. And when I watched Marino, my thought that whole time was, remember I saw him skating, I imagined Ty Smith in that spot, and I just thought, Wow.
What a difference.
What a difference, yeah.
Well, when John Marino came into the Devils system, we had pretty much a uniform reaction of, this guy is pretty good. This guy is the replacement for Damon Severson, who could be traded later this season. But for now, based on what I've seen, Damon Severson obviously still on the team. The Devils, with John Marino and Damon Severson in the mix, have a really, really strong defensive core. And John Marino has just really impressed me. And another player who's really impressed me has been Jonathan Bernier. Not because of, I mean, he's played well, but
he hasn't played in any preseason games.
I thought he's played in a preseason game.
No, he played in some of the scrimmages, but
well, he played in a scrimmage and played well. But the fact that he came back in the first place is really telling to how much faith the Devils are going to put in him. I can see him as a strong third-string goalie this year.
One more thing that I want to touch on in the preseason before we move on to the regular season is goaltending. That was the Devils' biggest woe last year. It's the reason why they were as far away from the playoffs as they were. They went through 7 goalies last year, that including 2 rookies. That's rough. John Gillies started like 15 games. Like, he shouldn't even to be sniffing the NHL, and he started like 15 games for the Devils. But so far this preseason, the Devils have a 5.76 goal saved above expected. This is all according to, I believe, Natural Stat Trick. A 952 save percentage, which is the 4th best in the NHL in the preseason. And Mackenzie Blackwood has saved 53 shots, 943 save percentage. Vitek Vanecek has saved 52-55, 945 save percentage, including a shutout last night. They both looked super impressive, especially Blackwood. He really looks like that goaltender we saw pre-COVID and pre-injuries.
Now, if we're looking at the defensive depth chart right now, it's going to look like a 1A, 1B situation of Vitek Vanecek and Mackenzie Blackwood. You're going to have Jonathan Bernier as your 3rd string, Nico Daws as your 4th string, and maybe Akira Schmid, if, God forbid, like, the injuries pile up again, he can maybe get like a game or 2 or playing time. But, yeah, that's a really strong goaltending depth chart.
I know you guys talked about, Jordan just said 1A, 1B. Do you have a certain goal you want to be the main prioritized starter?
I think that Mackenzie Blackwood has looked slightly better than Vitek Vanecek. You saw him when the Devils played the Rangers, when he was in his really hot streak in 2019-20. He robbed some games from the Rangers. Let's move on and talk about the predictions for this upcoming season, though, before we talk about the NHL as a whole. For the Devils, and honestly, not just for, I think the organization as a whole needs a successful season. They need a season in which they're at least competitive, close to the playoffs. The fans need it even more. I mean, if you watch the Devils' preseason games, even compared to other preseason games, it is empty at the Prudential Center. The game I was at, it was their first home preseason game, their first home game, even if it was preseason, first home game since the previous April, and it was like 5,000 people there. It was, my seats are right next to the announcers. You could hear Ken Danico from my seat. That's how quiet it was.
Yeah, and building off of what Jacob said, Puck Drop has been on the air for 3 seasons. We're going into our 4th season. The Devils have not made the playoffs.
They haven't even been 500.
They haven't even been Hockey 500 since we've been on the air. That is telling. They need a good season, and Alex Selvin can attest to this. Not everyone's a Devils fan anymore in New Jersey. I mean, he's been a lifelong Rangers fan, but you're seeing more and more people go away from the Devils. So I agree with Jacob. The Devils fans need a good season, and so do the team, because they really need to progress along this rebuild finally.
Listen, it's okay to be worried, especially as a fan, about the attendance and about just kind of the culture and the acknowledgement and appreciation coming from Devils fans and a lack of that. But I feel you have to take the actual attendance for preseason with a grain of salt and wait to see what it's like during the regular season, because you guys have young core and a future for guys like Hughes, for hopefully guys like Holtz, Mercer. Jesper Bratt's developing himself as one of the top playmakers in the league and a very underrated playmaker at this time.
Of course, yeah.
Listen, goaltending is a question mark, one would hope, and you saw in the past couple of years that Mackenzie Blackwood could be a potential all-star goalie. Although he's struggling right now. If you have a solid defensive core, you got a guy in Michigan right now, Luke Hughes, who can really add to that. So if you have Simon Nemec, exactly. You have this future and this outlook for a positive and entertaining team then you're going to start getting the fans coming back.
I agree with you. That's a very good point. You can't take preseason too seriously. And building off of what you said with the young core, we're basically back to square one with where we were last season, which is young, exciting core. We need to build on it. We need to finally progress along the rebuild, which is something we've been trying to do since we last made the playoffs in 2017-18.
Well, I think with that, we've talked about the Devils, what in general we think the Devils should be like this year and what they need to be like. Let's talk about more specifics along with the rest of the league. Let's talk about our predictions for each division standings along with wild cards. We're going to start with my own, if we can have that pulled up. And there it is. So we'll start out with the Pacific Division. I have the Oilers first. I love Connor McDavid. Flames got a little worse with the loss of Gaudreau, Tkachuk, addition of Huberdeau, Kadri. But I still think they're going to be really great. Vegas, I would have them higher if not for the fact that that they have no goaltending. And that's for the Pacific. Let's move to the Metro, though. I do have the Devils in the playoff spot. I don't know how confident I feel about that, but I have it.
We'll keep that for now. We'll keep that for now. Well, I mean, we'll keep it for now. I have them in a playoff spot, too. We'll get to it later. Alex, how do you feel about that?
I don't want to be, I don't want to break your heart, Jacob or Jordan.
Yeah.
First our bubble.
It's always good to be positive and hopeful for the season. But I just think that the Metropolitan Division, although
it's really tough.
It's a tough division. It's a hard division to compete with. I know the Capitals are slowing down. Islanders struggled last season and could very well struggle again this season. I think there's going to be a better outlook for this season for them. But all good, Jordan. But I think that with teams like the Rangers, the Hurricanes, the Penguins, even the Blue Jackets are starting to look competitive. They've always had good goaltending, but they've also kind of added.
Excuse me. No, you can mute my mic.
They've all added more depth and better. Getting Johnny Gaudreau for Columbus really adds sort of that positive mentality and an incredible all-star depth now, including Kent Johnson, who's coming up for his second season, really going to be his first full season, and there's a lot of hope for that.
He's so
talented.
I
don't know, you're still questioning Mackenzie Blackwood's season and how he's going to play. You're still questioning, will Vitek Vanacek be your starting goalie over Blackwood? It's hard when you have goalies like Merzlikins, like Jari, like Ilya Sorokin, like and Igor Shesterkin. So it's difficult.
I have two more hot takes that I want to discuss. First of all, I have the Ottawa Senators at 6th place. A lot of them have them as the champions of the offseason, and I agree. But you look, champions of the offseason usually are the losers of the regular season. And Ottawa has a great forward group. I don't trust that defense whatsoever outside Thomas Chabot, though. And that goaltending just took a huge blow with Cam Talbot being out for 7 to 8 weeks. I really don't trust Ottawa, which is why I have them at 6th in the Atlantic. And last but not least, if you want to just pull up my my standings one more time, I have the Minnesota Wild at 1st place in the Central over the Colorado Avalanche. And I think that Minnesota, I feel like people are really underrating this year. I mean, they did lose Fiala. That's a lot of secondary scoring that they lost. But they just, if you look at their roster, they just have such a strong team. They have Marc-Andre Fleury in net. He won the Vezina 2 years ago. People don't realize that. They have Fleury in net. Like I really feel like Minnesota is one of the more underrated teams in the NHL. And with Colorado, they lost a lot of key pieces from their Stanley Cup run, maybe a little bit of Stanley Cup hangover when the season starts. And I think that will lead to Minnesota winning the Central Division. That being said, let's move on to Jordan's predictions.
All right, so I'm just dealing with a few seasonal transitionary allergies, so bear with me as my voice cuts in and out. But I have a few hot takes. My main hot take in the Metro is the Devils getting into a playoff spot. I know, Alex, you said not to let my bubble burst, but the Capitals are slowing down, like you said. And I think they can compete with the rest of the Eastern Conference, especially with the Panthers, who really, I think they downgraded with the trade to get Tkachuk. And they sent away Huberdeau, and they really downgraded. I think they can sneak into a little playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. In the Central Division, thank you, Mr. Daly.
In the Central, Jordan, Let's see. You have Dallas.
I do have Dallas
over St. Louis.
I do have Dallas over St. Louis. St. Louis, I think, is a strong contender for a playoff spot. I think that division is really going to be a back and forth contest the whole year. But with the return of Tyler Seguin, excuse me, allergies are really bad, guys. I think the return of Tyler Seguin is really going to be something to look forward to. I think he's getting older, but I think he can really make a difference in that lineup, which has really struggled to score for years and years and years. My main hot take in the Pacific is going to be the Kings in a playoff spot.
You mean the Ducks?
Oh, yeah, the Ducks and Kings. Well, I don't think
the Kings made the playoffs last year. The Ducks is a really hot take.
The Ducks is an extremely hot take.
I did have the Ducks in a playoff spot. You're right, but they have a look. I think people are sleeping on that lineup. Do you remember last season when they were really, really hot out of the gate and they just spiraled at the end of the season? Everyone remembers that. They have a great lineup. They have a great lineup of stars. They have Trevor Zegras. I think he's really going to make great strides. Although he already made the All-Star game last season, he's going to make great strides. They still have John Gibson, and he's still a really, really solid goaltender. And
who is on that defensive front, though? You got no one.
You got no one, but I think if they can make some moves.
No one that can play defensively. I mean, they've signed John Klingberg, but he's not exactly known as a defensive defenseman.
Yeah, even though one would hope a defenseman who's 6'7" plays defense.
6'5",
you would hope so.
like that.
You would hope so, but that's not really the case. But I think if they make some moves at the deadline, and again, this is why it's a hot take, and this is why they're in 5th place. If they can make some moves at the deadline to get some defense, I think they can try and sneak into a playoff spot, especially if they don't spiral like they did last year. That was really uncharacteristic of them based on the first half.
Well,
the Kings in a playoff spot. I mean, Drew Doughty is going to come back strong.
Talked about the Devils. We talked about the Wild, the Senators, Ducks. Let's move on to Alex's predictions. We're going to talk about some of his hot takes, including talking about being high in your team. You have the Rangers first in the Metro.
I mean, listen, they were second in the Metro last year. Did Carolina have a great offseason? Absolutely. Did the Rangers steal? Vinny Trocheck, 1,000%. We're talking about a Rangers team that was getting better every game throughout the season and is only going to get better this season. It's hard to debate, what team's going to be best when you have the best goalie in the division.
It's true.
It's hard to debate. Potentially best goalie in the league. I'm going to still give it to Vasilevsky. I'm not going to, be biased towards Igor. I love Igor, but give Igor 2 or 3 more seasons and we'll see.
He's still the best in the world.
How he
the best in
competes.
the world as of now.
Vasilevsky, absolutely. I agree, 1,000%. I mean, absolutely. But you have a forward core that could have a starting first line on the third line for the Rangers, right? Like, you could put those kid line. Honestly, I could see those kids lines playing on a team like Phoenix, on a team like Anaheim, maybe, possibly you could see them as. So you have incredible forward depth, and you have incredible defensive depth. The question is, one, size. The Rangers do struggle with size, although they have Ryan Reeves, and it's great to have that. Overall, player-wise, and especially on the defensive end, they're struggling when it comes to size. I mean, they lost a 6th defenseman in whoever it was. I mean, it was Braun for a little bit. It was my least favorite player in the league. I'm not even going to say his name.
Patrick Nemeth.
Don't even say his name. Now it's said to be that Zach Jones, who is about the same height as Adam Fox, who is 5'11" or so, will be that 6th defenseman. So they're really struggling when it comes to size on the defensive end. I know they have K'Andre Miller. I know they have Jacob Trouba. And hopefully K'Andre Miller plays at a more physical game given his 6'4" frame, but we'll see. But I think that the Rangers just overall can be a very talented team.
My mindset, they're definitely still going to be a playoff team. You're never not going to make the playoffs when you have Igor Shesterkin in the net. But my thought process is they got worse over the offseason. They lost a lot of key pieces to that playoff run. They were one of the worst 5-on-5 teams in terms of advanced possession metrics before the trade deadline. They lost practically all of their pieces. Even like Ryan Strome, they replaced him with Vinny Trocheck, who I think is a little bit better overall than Ryan Strome. But we're going to have to see where this goes with the Rangers. I think they got a little worse, and you're going to have to expect at least a little regression. Even if it's only just a little bit from guys like Chris Kreider and even Igor Shesterkin a little bit. Like, what are the odds he puts up a .930 save percentage in 6?
I doubt that, absolutely. Again. But I still also think that you can see a regression in Carolina because a lot of they do have veteran presence there that is starting to age a little bit. Guys like, I'm I'm trying to think. On their defensive front, I mean, I know they brought in Brent Burns, but how much is Brent Burns going to offer when it comes to?
I feel like Brent Burns, he's one of the more underrated additions in the offseason, in my opinion. Brent Burns has been one of the league leaders in time on ice for years now. He should not be playing in that role. He's now going to be playing on a defense pair with Jacob Slavin, who is one of the best defensive defensemen in the entire NHL. And Brent Burns, I feel like he's going to have a lot of that stress defensively that he had put on him when he was in San Jose these past few years. That's going to be taken off, playing with Jacob Slavin. I feel like that is a perfect partner for him. He already has 3 goals in 2 preseason games this year.
I'm not going to lie, I really wanted Brent Burns, like, badly. But whatever, Carolina took him. But I still think when it comes to offensively, Carolina is very talented. But Vinny Trocheck was a huge piece of that offensive core in depth, and you have, I'm blanking on some certain names.
Sebastian Aho.
No, don't get me wrong. Sebastian Aho.
Teuvo Teravainen.
Yeah, Teuvo Teravainen, Nikas, and Svechnikov. Those are guys that are young and extremely talented.
Seth Jarvis was a rookie last year. He was
Seth
fantastic.
Jarvis, absolutely. So they do have that sort of young talent that is pretty comparable when you come to the Rangers' young talent and core-wise. But that third and fourth line for them
gets a little iffy. And whereas the Rangers, you have guys like Vitaly Kravtsov, 9th overall pick, who is hopefully, I'm praying, going to actually pan out and start playing. They're looking to see him on the second line playing with Panarin.
Well, I mean, I want to talk one last somewhat hot take you have here, and that is Winnipeg in a playoff spot, 4th in the Central Division. Winnipeg, I don't know about Winnipeg.
The whole entire season depends on whether or not Hellebuck can support the team. I think that Dallas, potentially given, we'll see how
and really, Jason Robertson hasn't signed yet.
The whole question is, and like I've brought up throughout this whole entire show, is how are the goalies going to impact their team, right? Can Oettinger help lead the team to the playoffs? I mean, the way he played in the playoffs, one would hope that throughout the season he can do even a fraction of that, and they would be set to be in the playoffs. But they do struggle overall with depth-wise, and they're struggling because Robertson hasn't signed yet. They got rid of Klingberg, and they had Heiskanen on the defensive end, but who else really? I mean,
like Esa Lindell.
Yeah, but those are 2 players.
It's true.
Klingberg adds that depth, and you need that depth. Nashville, another team I really think struggles on the defensive depth, and I really think that although that they have a strong goalie in UC Saros, they're just lacking depth. They're lacking depth, and they don't really have a superstar in Nashville.
Honestly, Nashville, I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think it's going to be another season where they make the playoffs. They're 3rd, maybe 2nd wild card team in that Central Division.
I just think,
and then they lose in the 1st or 2nd round.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, they did have a good offseason. They got Ryan McDonough on a cap done from Tampa. That's a really nice move. You know how good McDonough is, even with his age now. And Nino Niederreiter, one of the better underrated signings of the offseason. I feel like
that's the name. Yes, Nino Niederreiter not being on Carolina is getting rid of that depth.
Carolina, though, they did add Max Pacioretty. He's going to be hurt, but that's huge for them down the stretch. I feel like this is a good spot to wrap things up, though. We talked about a lot of different teams in the NHL today. The Devils we talked about for a long time. Hopefully, of course, their goaltending can hold up. We'll have to see, though. Season starts, first season review preview, regular episodes 2 weeks from now. Next week, join us. We're going to be doing a tier list for all-time Devils greats. That should be really fun. Thank you for Alex for joining us.
It was a pleasure being here, guys.
Maui.
It was incredible.
That's all for today. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
You didn't do the puppet.